Good afternoon, and welcome to the San Antonio Report's 11th Annual Education Forum. Our title today for this event is The New Normal: How Student-Centered Funding is Changing the Education Landscape. Thank you. I want to start our program by thanking our sponsors, which make this work possible. First, our presenting sponsor, the Charles Butt Foundation. Thank you. Now join me in thanking our leadership sponsor, Up Partnership. You were prepared. Thanks also to our gold sponsors, City Education Partners, Valero, the Gambrinus Company, Pre-K for SA, Frost Bank, and so many others. Thank you all for your support. A huge thank you also to Texas Public Radio for hosting us in their beautiful space. I'm so glad you all could find it. Welcome. Now, today's topic is not an easy one to tackle. In Texas and around the country, voucher-style or education savings accounts programs have become political footballs, energizing public school advocates as well as proponents of school choice. It's caused people in rooms like this one to feel anything from cautiously optimistic to incredibly concerned about what Texas's new normal for education will look like. Our educational system enrolls more than 5.5 million children in public kindergarten through 12th grade schools, and our state lags in several key metrics of educational attainment when compared to other states and the nation as a whole. Governor Greg Abbott's new $1 billion ESA program is the change that state leaders think Texas needs to address the needs of its school-aged population. But many education advocates worry that this new program will siphon money away from already cash-strapped public schools, and once allocated, these dollars, public dollars, will be difficult to track and account for. For Texas families, making the best decision for your students' needs is a challenge that every parent goes through, and each year those needs and those options can look different. At the San Antonio Report, we don't shy away from tough conversations. As a community newsroom, we believe that our job is not just to point out problems, it's to help find areas of common ground and help readers see and seize upon opportunities and find reasons for hope. That is the substance of our event today. The second half of our luncheon will be much more locally focused, with several San Antonio area educational leaders helping us get practical about what the first school year with ESAs in place will actually look like. But we're kicking off with a panel with a wider perspective. We have three education policy experts: Dr. Patrick Wolf from the University of Arkansas, Dr. Ashley Rogers Berner from the Johns Hopkins Institute for Education, and Derrell Bradford, the president of 50CAN, a nonprofit organization that advocates for K-12 education reform across the nation. They've seen up close the rollout and after effects of voucher and ESA programs in other states across the U.S. and can help illuminate the path forward for us today. So I'd like to start off by asking each of you to give a brief history of vouchers and ESAs around the nation. Which states have them, which don't, and what have we learned since they first came on the scene? We can start with Dr. Berner on that one first.
So, thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be back in San Antonio. This is my third trip to San Antonio in about 6 months. But my first was when I was a little girl. My dad was stationed at Fort Sam Houston, so it's great to be back. So I'm going to actually give just a brief thing. About 35 states have access to non-public schools right now for low-income families. I'm going to actually let Patrick and Derrell talk more specifically about that. I think my role on the panel is to talk about what most countries do. How many people here knew, I didn't know this, that most democracies around the world support educational choice by design? The United States is the outlier with that. So if we're talking numbers of how many states have policies that allow low-income families to attend private schools, I would pull it back a step further and say 81% of the countries of the world actually make that public-private partnership possible. And what I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about is the generosity of spirit that opens up.
Dr. Wolf, will you take that one next?
Yes, just following up on Dr. Berner's point, there's an important distinction between public schools and public education. So the idea of public education is that we as the public support the development of the children of our country through financial support, resources that support their education. This is the education of the public. And the exact location or instrument or sector where that education takes place can vary. It doesn't necessarily have to be publicly controlled and publicly directed district-run schools. So I think that's an important distinction. And we see that in the actual birth of private school choice in Vermont in 1869. Yes, that was the very first private school choice program was launched shortly after the Civil War in rural Vermont because Vermont policymakers realized that they had many communities that had small religious schools but didn't have the critical mass to establish a full-blown public school. And this was a problem. So how are the children in these rural areas going to be educated with support from the public? And the policymakers in Vermont decided, well, we'll pay the tuition on behalf of these children to the private schools. And they developed a policy called town tuitioning in the rural areas of their state. Maine adopted the same approach 4 years later in 1873. So for 118 years, these two rural states in the United States had private school choice programs. No one else did. Another breakthrough was in Milwaukee in 1990, when a coalition of community groups in inner city Milwaukee partnered with the Republican governor at the time, Tommy Thompson, and they developed this idea of an urban school voucher program, the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program. Cleveland followed suit a few years later, then Washington, D.C. Florida was the first state to have a statewide private school choice program starting in 1997. Arizona then came on board and they pushed the envelope in a lot of ways. They developed the ESA design, which is much more flexible than a school voucher because the monies can be spent on a wide variety of educational products and services. That was launched in 2011. And now here comes Texas, a long time in the making, but looking to do private school choice big and to do it right.
Mr. Bradford, will you take that one next?
So thank you again for having me. I just want to apologize for all the bald people who know if the light is getting you in the back. I'm sorry. You know, the hardest thing about being on a panel with like really, really smart people is trying to come up with something interesting. I'm sure that this will become a more ebullient discussion over time. But I would like to reframe a little bit of this right now. So America's a school choice country. And I can tell you the first time I realized we were a school choice country, it was when my mother and my grandmother were sitting at a kitchen table in Southwest Baltimore talking about whose address we were going to use so that I could go to the middle school I was not zoned for. So this is a deeply provocative, like, we could have gone to jail for that. This is serious stuff going on here, right? But, you know, my family, like, sort of like lower class, like working class, black family in Baltimore. We were just trying to get the school that was right for me. That conversation didn't sort of ratify itself to me as a policy discussion until much, much, much later in life when I realized that in the bulk of the country, we have an education system that values your address over your aspirations, right? It's where you live, not who you want to live your life as or who you want to be at some point in the future. And so I just highlight all that to say that what I think is going on right now is something that is it's anchored in like the precondition of giving families more, opportunity, but it is bigger than that. Like it sort of stands to unwind some things that are like, some structures that are kind of persistently troublesome in how we make educational opportunity available to people, some flexibilities that I would argue sort of everybody needs, and that includes public school districts. Like, I'd love to talk a little bit about how public schools are and charter schools are participating in this growing world of ESAs. But by some reports, half of the kids in America are eligible for one, like some flavor of flexible education, finance that could let you go to a private school, or might let you homeschool, or might let you buy, services, or might let you, get physics at your local public school, or something like that. So I just say all that to say that I tend to describe the current moment as a revolution in school finance. It takes 4 or 5 different forms, some of which have been, tested in states for a long time, like, Dr. Wolf's point about the first, kind of Arizona ESA proposal for special needs kids, or like the public school tax credit there, which is also a long-standing policy. And now there's just a lot more exposure and a lot more willingness to try. So not without risks, but I hope the benefits will outweigh them.
My home state is Arizona, so I've seen some of this play out from afar, but rollouts of ESAs are seldom without controversy. In Utah, the original approach to the program has been rethought due to accountability concerns, with 2026's version tightening rules about how the funds can be used and enhancing oversight. What are some of the challenges that rolling out a program like Texas is using for the first time this fall? We'll start with Mr. Bradford on that one.
So, I don't want to get my head handed to me. I understand and appreciate local context. I would just like to throw that out there. So, and I know I am not from Texas, although I've been here 2 times in the last 3 months, and I've only eaten meat every time I've been here. So just sort of share that too. You got that on lockdown. So I think part of the challenge is that like any constituency, right? So there are people who are going to benefit from the policy. There are people who are invested in the policy from like a philosophical point of view, or whatever. There are legislators who have to pass the policy, and I don't want to be sort of obtuse about it. Legislators listen to this radio station called WIIFM. Have you ever heard of this radio station? What's in it for me? That's what that is, right? And so they're wondering what's in it for them too. Is it gonna is it notoriety, power, money? Is it happy constituents? These things are all natural incentives of something like this. One of the greatest challenges is that these groups want different things, right? So overall, they can be invested in a similar policy, but they can want the similar policy for different things. So families, for instance, want maximum flexibility. They're I want to be able to use this, whatever the funds are, in as easy a way as possible on as many things as possible, right? Schools want different things, right? They may be well, I want you to choose me, right? Which is a natural incentive. So they're how do we constrain the market so that who participates is different than other? There may be some well-meaning education policy advocates that are just well, I only want people to pick things that I think are great. So the question of how do we measure is really important to that group. And then if you are in the elected class, your number one thing is, I don't want to be above the fold on the San Antonio report because something went wrong. I don't want to be that guy. So I would just say the hardest part is just acknowledging that all of those things are real and equally valid. And the political process is meant to help you balance who gets what in a system of trade-offs, and I think the Utah example is a useful instance of that.
Dr. Berner, will you take that one?
Sure. Don't let Mr. Bradford fool you. He has a PhD in very cool socks. I want everyone to see it. Anytime he speaks, anywhere, he's got the coolest socks in the room. I challenge anybody to take him on for this. No, I think one of the risks in rolling these things out for me, because I'm one of those, I'm going to raise my hand and say, I care about quality. I do care that it's not just choice. I think choice is necessary but insufficient. We have to care about quality. I worry about the families having real access to information that will help them choose what's good for their. First of all, I want all the choices to be high quality, and that's a difficult proposition, I know, but I think secondarily, helping the families, particularly first generation families, we have acculturated, habituated our families not to choose. And one of the most interesting things that Dr. Wolf has found in his research is that families who've never been able to have agency around their child's education because they don't have the money to move to a suburban school district, families, it's a process of learning as they engage with the options that are available. One of his books is called the School Choice Journey, and it's about parents learning what their entire vocabulary and frame of reference and how they make decisions changes. So we're talking to a room full of people who are very involved in the communities, or you all are community volunteers and leaders. This is a key area where I would say have human beings on point, not just a website, but human beings to help families think through the options. That is very, very important. Otherwise, you will end up not necessarily serving the people that you really want to serve. The kind of equal access to excellence is what we should all be about.
Dr. Wolf, I appreciate we asked for a history and we get a history. Will you talk about accountability and how you look at that?
Sure. So basically, when you move into parental choice in education, my view is that the state is leaning on parents to be an important accountability mechanism. They're going to be an instrument of accountability in the program because they're going to vote with their feet. And if a school is not working out or an educational arrangement is not working out for their child, they will move their child to a better situation. And so through all of these moves, all of these shifts, you get some signals of, it's almost like a democratic signal of quality and what's working for particular types of students. I don't believe that's the sole instrument of accountability in these programs. There certainly has to be accountability for the spending that takes place because these are public funds. Now, there was a lot of misinformation that came out of Arizona recently about the levels of fraud in their ESA program. I think what's interesting is there have been multiple reports with very careful reviews of the spending in programs in Iowa, in Missouri, in Arkansas, and also in Arizona. What we're seeing is we're seeing less than 2% of the spending is on what might be broadly considered questionable items, questionable products or services. And when you drill down on those, about 0.3% of the expenditures in these programs would qualify as outright fraud. 0.3% in Missouri, 0.3% in Iowa, 0.3% in Arkansas. It's a very common finding. These are extremely low fraud levels for government programs. So the implementers are doing well in terms of preventing fraudulent expenditures. But part of this is, and my colleagues have hinted at it, is we need to think about a broad set of choices and varieties in terms of how a child should be educated. Different parents with different children are going to have different visions of what effectively educates their child. I'll give you an example that came out of Arkansas. Of the $84 million spent on our program last year, a couple $100 was spent on a chicken coop for a homeschooling family. Now, is that fraudulent, or is that an appropriate expenditure? Well, it turns out that the family's homeschooling program was an agriculture-themed program. They're teaching their children how to potentially be farmers or how to be involved in agriculture. It's the #1 industry in Arkansas. So with investigation from the administrators of the program, they were convinced that this was a legitimate resource for teaching children. But in some cases, someone might consider that to be fraudulent or to be illegitimate. So we have to be broad-minded. We have to be careful, not jump to conclusions. All indications are that these programs are being implemented with a minimum amount of inappropriate purchases and fraud.
Can I jump on that, if that's okay? So a couple quick things about this. So lately I've become a great defender of chicken coops and Legos. Because these are the two purchases that get you put in the ninth circle. And I remember there was another piece I was reading where somebody bought a pass to SeaWorld. And all the people that were hating on this were like, well, I want to go to SeaWorld too, right? So there was just a very different discussion going on there. So all of this notwithstanding, and I didn't come up with this, but it is so sticky, I will say it here. You regulate a monopoly and a market differently. And we have like an educational continuum right now that has basically it has a big state monopoly, which has all this power, right? It has the power of compulsory attendance. That's the number one thing that it has, right? It collects, it can bond, it can do all these other incredible things. It collects data through state assessments, right? It makes all these, sort of decisions that way. And then we have charter schools, right? Which are like a little bit less of that. I'm a great supporter of charter schools, right? So we have a state authorizer. In some states, the state is the authorizer or the only authorizer. In other places, the school district is. The majority of charter school authorizers in America, something like almost 90% of them, are actually school districts. They just tend not to use the power, very often, right? We have state authorizers, we have nonprofit boards, and we have parent choice, right? So the parents' role goes up a notch in terms of like how much we're relying on them to send that signal that Dr. Wolf talked about, right? And then there's some states where we have private school programs to support enrolling in private schools, right? And so in Florida, for instance, they say, well, you have to publish test scores, but it's up to the family to decide what they want to do. So here we've seen the family's role go up yet another notch, right? And then there's this whole like brave new world free range sector that is, cropping up all over the place that includes microschools and hybrid homeschool arrangements and this kind of stuff. And there we're asking the parent, like, no, like you do it, right? Like you figure it out and we'll talk about it later. So this continuum, I think, is incredibly important. It's a different way to think about the range of options that people have, that people can attend now that more public financing happens to be available.
No. So I think what you're seeing here is a little bit of kind of tension among people who are generally supportive of parental choice programs. And I think, the tension is about how much transparency, who decides, what are the levers of control. And I guess what I want to just focus on for a moment is the statistic about the percentage of American fourth graders who can read right now. Anybody know what that percentage is? It's in the 30s, right? 30% can read. This is a 5-alarm emergency. What's the percentage of 12th graders? 12th graders, 18-year-olds about to march off into the real world. Percentage of 12th graders who are competent in U.S. history?
22%.
13%. So as someone who works and studies internationally, parental agency is solving one of the problems that we restrict people to their zone. It's solving one of the problems. It's not solving the other problem inherently. It may. I agree that some parents will have access to great opportunities that will help their kids learn how to read. But if I were a policymaker, I would want to address both of those problems. Very difficult to address the academic rigor problem. There was a sad report that came out in 2018 called The Opportunity Myth. It was a study by TNTP where they went and blanketed the country looking at classroom observations. Mostly, they were all district schools, I think, but it doesn't matter what sector it was. If you were from a low-income family, you only had 40% chance of receiving on-grade level instruction. So we're systematically under-challenging our students. And so what I would hope is that we can leverage this opportunity to also talk about academic rigor and academic quality, because that access to academic rigor is what closes achievement gaps. That's actually what you see at work when families enroll their kids in a Catholic high school, for example. Close the achievement gaps. In part, it's academic rigor. In part, it's strong, distinctive school cultures. But it's not magic. And so one of the things my institute's looking at is how can we look at states that are implementing what we call HQIM, or high quality instructional materials, and really working with their districts to expand the use of really great materials. How could we take that up a notch? Not just for district schools, but for private schools or charter schools that opt in to have curriculum-aligned assessments. This is a game changer. AI could help make it happen. Louisiana did this with John White as a commissioner. You're laughing at me. He's laughing.
It was there in the front row. We're laughing.
It's you. I see you. No, but it can be done. In fact, we had a meeting in DC last week about how could we help states that already care about HQIM actually turn that into an opportunity for assessments that matter, that are not just skills-based. Parents want to know how their kids are doing. Policymakers need to know that kids can read. So that's where I come from. That's the kind of some of the variety of opinions that you have on the stage.
Yeah, and academic outcomes, I think, is a big piece of this conversation. Also, the concept of funding being limited, how it feels like a zero-sum game to some of the public school advocates in Texas. But we are limited on time. I thank you all for being here, but I do want to ask...
No!
I know, we're not done yet. I do want to ask one question that I think is important for this moment, which is that, the debate over whether this should happen is over. It is happening. Given where Texas stands in the process about to embark upon making this a reality, can you give your best advice to this room of education experts and members of the business community? As we head into a new normal, what should we keep in mind and be prepared for?
Okay, I'll start. And I think what you should be prepared for is, and I'm going to draw from my favorite Ashley Berner book, and that is Educational Pluralism, No One Way to School. What you're going to see in Texas is you're going to see the evolution of a variety of schooling models that cross traditional school sectors and combine them in interesting ways. Basically, a universal school choice program tends to unleash the entrepreneurial instincts in the leaders of educational institutions. So you'll see districts launching virtual schools. You'll see hybrid homeschools, private schools partnering with homeschool organizations, public schools partnering with homeschool organizations to build the educational program that best fits the needs of distinctive groups of students. And what you'll also see, and this is drawing from the research literature, is this dynamism in the K-12 education sector will yield positive results for students, particularly the students who remain in district-run public schools. It is the single most common finding in the research literature on school choice is that when district-run public schools are exposed to competition from new or expanding choice programs, the educational outcomes for their students improve. So I'm excited about what's going to happen in Texas, and I think you should be too.
So my two pieces of advice. First is find a way to collaborate across sectors. There are cities and states that have done this. Boston's done it very well. Find ways to collaborate with the things that matter. Teachers, materials, giving teachers the resources, the practice. So collaboration. Number two, this is just a bleating cry to not elect people who criticize and diminish entire sectors. Just don't elect someone who says failing public schools or someone who says, you know, charters are robbing districts. Just if there were a way to elect people who know how to compromise and how to affirm, that would be a great world.
So a couple quick things. One, thank you for being here. This is a great thing. A lot of people here. It's awesome. The second thing I just want to say is, like, you know, Texas matters in ways that you might not believe or think. For almost 20 years, the entire country lived out the in education policy the rules of the Houston Independent School District, and that was No Child Left Behind. Right? So right now, Texas is embarking on another sort of adventure in education policy and education finance, and it's really important, and everyone is watching. That's the second thing. Third quick thing, we are multi-issue, which I don't think you guys sort of know. So we're as likely to do an ESA as HQIM, right? So we care about all these things, and I know that the three of us all agree that school choice, or like education choice, is a sort of a foundational and necessary precondition, but not a magic bullet, right? So like you do that, you give people more opportunity to match with the school that works for them. That doesn't mean that the work's over. There are other things that you need to do. And then the last thing, only because I was looking at the data this morning, and I'm sure someone else will be able to tell you, there are almost 30,000 children in San Antonio who applied for the Texas Education Freedom account. And of the 250,000 that applied, I think 43% are either low income or have a disability, right? Those are the two sort of priority groups. So it will be very interesting to see how this rolls itself out in its first year, and the rest of us will be watching.
Thank you so much for being here and for traveling to participate in this conversation. I'm really grateful for your time. Now I'd like to invite to the stage our publisher, Angie Mock, for a special presentation.
Thank you all so much. Yes, I'm Angie Mock. I'm the CEO and publisher of the San Antonio Report. Thank you all for being here, and thanks again to our presenting sponsor, the Charles Butt Foundation, and our leadership sponsor, partnership and all the sponsors for making this lovely event happen. Today we honor two champions for education. First, we honor Jeanne Russell. Jeanne Russell is a proud mom of two, but in many ways, a mom of thousands of San Antonio kids through her life's work in transformative education. Jeanne started her career as a teacher, later tackling educational challenges as an award-winning investigative journalist, and then moved to the public sector to contribute to solving the very concerns that she had spotlighted as a journalist. She left city government to help found SA 2020, and later co-founded a consulting practice where she helped design multiple initiatives catalyzing regional economic mobility. So many signature education initiatives in San Antonio reflect Jeanne's design. Cafe College, SA Works, Pre-K for SA, and of course, CAST, Centers for Applied Science and Technology, where Jeanne was the founding executive director. CAST is a nonprofit network dedicated to economic mobility and nurturing San Antonio's homegrown talent. CAST is not just innovative in its configuration, but it's how the system approaches teaching and learning. And it's through Jeanne's leadership that there has been an incredible broadening of what belonging looks like for students. She's promised that she's not retiring just yet, which we're all very grateful for, and will remain active in the field of education. And to help me honor Jeanne, please welcome Jeanne Maestas.
Thank you, Angie. Well, if you know Jeanne Russell, there is a very good chance that you've been Jeanne Russelled. Yes. And if you don't know her, you might be wondering what getting Jeanne Russelled means. And I'm going to do my very best to explain that. But it's like magic. And magic is actually really hard to explain. Any explanation doesn't really feel real enough. And just like it's hard to explain and hard to reckon with magic, you might think that Jeanne's superpower feels very big, intimidating even. And maybe it is for some people. But that's never been my experience with Jeanne. I have seen Jeanne use her superpower for good. If you know somebody who needs a place to land for a little while, Jeanne opens her home. If you need a connection to an allergist, Jeanne knows one. If you need help finding an internship for a young person, Jeanne knows 10 places where you could look. If you have really terrible symptoms that like a regular doctor can't identify, Jeanne has a specialist that can save you. If you're a young person in college and you need gap funding, Jeanne has fundraised for exactly that. When one of our schools needed professional clothing so that our students look sharp in interviews, it was actually one of Jeanne's friends that donated a clothes closet. When something goes wrong and a school or a leader doesn't have what they need to fulfill the CAS promise, Jeanne is the first advocate, sometimes the loudest, and she actively lines up others to make sure that that problem gets solved. Jeanne knows how to harness the power of her network to bring joy and healing, and in doing so, she's already looped you into the solution. Suddenly, it's you who's the innovator, the problem solver, the creator. You are the internship provider, the advisor, the donor, the champion, the supporter. You've been Jeanne Russelled. And 6 years ago, I was Jeanne Russelled into the CAST universe, and I cannot be more grateful. Jeanne, you've been a mentor and an inspiration and a true friend. And we're really excited to watch your magic in new ways. And we're really thankful for you teaching us how to make some magic of our own. We love you.
A gift for you on the exit.
Congratulations, Jeanne. Next, we would be hard-pressed to find a more respected leader in Texas education than Dr. Shari Albright. Shari earned her bachelor's and master's degree from Trinity University and her doctorate in educational leadership from Teachers College, Columbia University. The beginning of Shari's career as a teacher, director, and assistant principal in East Central ISD, and later as a Trinity professor, no doubt laid a practitioner's foundation to what would come later. Shari has molded so many important educational organizations in San Antonio and throughout Texas. Shari served as the principal of Public Magnet School, the International School of the Americas, and was named the Texas High School Principal of the Year for 2004 by the HEB Excellence in Education Awards. Shari guided the merger of Raise Your Hand Texas and the Charles Butt Foundation. In her recent role as president of the Charles Butt Foundation, Shari served for more than 7 years, where she was instrumental in shaping statewide efforts to elevate the teaching profession. Shari has an unwavering belief that Texas students deserve high-quality teachers. And because of that, so many students have had just that. The true scale of her contributions may never be fully understood. But years from now, when hundreds of students reflect on that special teacher that shaped their life, we all know that Shari had a hand in it, a hand with great care and imagination. Mark, Larson, please join me to help honor Dr. Albright.
I had the good sense to ask and then listen when I had Shari start to guide my life about more than 30 years ago. I met her as a college student. That was 3 hair colors from me ago. Brown and then frosted tips. It wasn't great. And then 3 years later, when I was a college student after that, Shari, in I think what was her only questionable decision as a principal, hired me as a teacher. She then helped me find a path to school leadership, and then into the work that we do now with early childhood. I'm grateful to you, Shari, personally. I'm grateful to you professionally and in every way. Shari demonstrates warmth in everything she does, even when you are on the losing end of a decision to move from teaching seniors to teaching freshmen, which I was very much against, and of course it was the right choice way back when. She does this with grace. She gives second chances to those most in need, and does so with warmth, laughter, and helping you find your purpose. She, way back when I was teaching, she and her husband, Rob, wrapped their arms around me in many, many ways and helped to keep shaping the path of my life. The unsurprising piece is that I am one of thousands of people who could come up here instead of me. There are countless of us who have had our lives shaped directly by Shari or indirectly by Shari in so many ways. We have turned into educators, we've turned into scientists, principals, superintendents, school designers, policymakers, turtle rescuers. That happened, not me, but phenomenal moms, phenomenal dads, sisters and brothers, business leaders, tech leaders, bookstore owners, and just about anything you can think of. I was imagining if we could take a globe, not even just San Antonio, not Texas, not the US, but really a globe with so much of her work has even been international, and if we could put a pin where somebody has had their life impacted by what Shari has done, you would have a disco ball that would be quite glorious and a testament to what she has done for so many of us. She's been an advocate for the field, a champion, and helped to elevate pretty much every aspect of school you can come up with. School design, curriculum, teacher preparation, workforce preparation, college readiness, school culture, leader preparation, philanthropy, teacher voice, early childhood, higher ed, how we use data, how we build community. Every one of these things Shari has shaped in this long and really quite phenomenal journey. To say thank you, I'm going to, particularly when somebody who has such a broad, expansive impact, This is not a sentence used to diagram, but stay with me just for a second. It's going to be a little confusing. So first of all, Shari, on behalf of the hundreds and thousands of people that we know whose lives were made better by you, thank you. And on behalf of the tens and hundreds of thousands of people whose lives are better that this room doesn't know, and who you may not even know, and who may never have heard of you, thank you. We thank you for all of what you've done for us, and we thank you for that we know about, and we thank you for so much that we will never know about, that you've done for this room, this city, this state, this country, and our planet. Thank you so much.
Now please welcome the San Antonio Report's managing editor, Laura Garcia, who will moderate our second panel to take this discussion today to a bit more of a local lens. Welcome, Laura and panelists.
Thank you. Thank you, Angie, for that lovely tribute to two major education leaders. Let's see, let's just get settled. Okay, now it's time for our second panel, the local lens on student-centered funding, featuring our key leaders in Bexar County education space and statewide. So, like Leigh explained earlier, we're at a key moment in education in Texas. The national and state landscape is full of political challenges for educators in public schools. Meanwhile, the rise of charter schools and now a state-sponsored voucher-style program for private school funding is fueling a total reshape of our educational structure. San Antonio, as you know, is home to more than a dozen separate public school systems. What these changes mean for them, at the same time, many are facing declining enrollment and therefore funding. It's a big piece of the puzzle. But the reality is that education savings accounts are going live this fall, and hundreds of thousands of students have already applied. Okay, so Daniel, I want to start with you. You're subbing in on our panel today for Mary Catherine Stout, who was scheduled to be here, but had to cancel last minute. She was the program director of Texas Education Savings Accounts, which is a division of the comptroller's office. So that's not you. But the two of you worked closely together, correct? And given your role as a Texas State Director for Odyssey, a technology company that partners with states to implement school choice policies across the country, for our audience, since you're pinch hitting today, as our Texas ESA's insider, can you give us an overview of what the program's meant to accomplish?
Sure. So Daniel Warner, Texas State Director with Odyssey. Thank you all for having me. And late last night, got a call. Mary Catherine asked me to come. Happy to be here. So most of you probably know in 2025, Senate Bill 2 was passed. It appropriated $1 billion for the school year, for the 26-27 school year, to create a program that allowed private school kids, homeschools kids to participate. And part of that is there were 5 basically priority buckets the legislature lined out pretty clear. First priority bucket is the family makes less than 500% of the federal poverty limit and with special needs. The second category is less than 200% of the federal poverty limit. The third category is between 200% and 500%. The fourth category, I call it 4A, 4B. 4A is you above 500% of the federal poverty limit and you attended a public school the previous year. And then that last category is currently enrolled private schools. So the legislature made it pretty clear on what that prioritization groups kind of looked like. And so we opened the application for schools back in December, and we have about 2,500 normal, or I shouldn't say normal, accredited K-12 private schools, and then about half and half split about pre-K and childcare providers that were allowed to participate in this program as well. So the pre-K eligibility is a little different than K through 12, but today is supposed to be the last day of applications, and there's about 265,000 applications for children across the state. Pretty geographically diverse. We will not get through nearly close to half of funding those accounts this year. And so we will see when that application windows, and we're expecting to let families know of their awards starting mid-month next month. And so that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Let's start with Dahlia. City Education Partners has done all sorts of research into what local students need and how ESAs will affect them. Can you speak to what you see as the opportunities and challenges of this program in Bexar County?
Good afternoon, everyone, and congratulations, Jeanne and Shari. You're amazing. So, this is definitely an opportunity for San Antonio. We have been hosting a series of conversations that are helping us position it that way. Narrative is everything. We believe that when you're in scarcity mindset and when fear is very strong, your brain isn't even operating with the ability to think creatively about the opportunity for children. I've worked in education for 25 years. I started off at Zachary Middle School in San Antonio's Northside ISD. I was an assistant principal at Pat Neff. I also went to almost every single school district in San Antonio, 19 schools before graduating high school. And we know that for many, their school's working for them. And there is also a group of students for whom school is not working. And it's really important for us to center the voices of families and children who are not having the best experience in their school, whatever it might be. Maybe it's their neighborhood traditional ISD school. Maybe it's a charter school. Maybe it's a private school. We have found certain pockets of students that are really struggling. We have students who are chronically absent from school for a variety of reasons and could really leverage a different opportunity tailored for them. And who gets to tailor that opportunity? It could really be anyone. We recently had an event with 5 ISD superintendents, and the amount of creativity and openness that they brought to the table really left me thinking like San Antonio kids are gonna be in good shape, because ISD superintendents were talking to private micro school operators saying, hey, I think we could work together. I have chronically absent students that I'm not serving well. There is a new tool in the toolkit that creates greater flexibility. We could do some hybrid schooling. They could come in 2 to 3 days a week. We can tailor the experience to their needs while still ensuring, like Dr. Berner Rogers shared, academic outcomes and really strong literacy scores. How do we build that together? And so I think that for students who are chronically absent, for students with special and diverse learning needs, there is so much we can still do for families in that arena. It should be family driven. We should be talking to them. We should be leveraging the power of many creative educators that we have in San Antonio who are also frustrated but love teaching and want to do something different. And that really is open for any operator, whether you're a traditional ISD superintendent, you're a charter superintendent, you're a private school, you're a teacher that's leaving and starting your own micro school. It's really open for anyone who deeply cares about children and wants to create a pathway that will help them be successful.
Dahlia, thank you so much. Marisa, you've served on the Texas State Board of Education since 2012, so you've seen many changes in Texas education over the years. This may be the biggest one yet. So what are your concerns about how ESAs will function starting this fall? And in your mind, are there any positives to this new normal that we're talking about today?
Thank you so much for the question, and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I think, first and foremost, as a policy individual up here, I kind of am looking at this from a different perspective, and I get a lot of phone calls from constituents and emails with questions about things I was not able to answer, and so I will say I really appreciate the work that Dahlia is leading with City Education Partners and the partnerships that are happening across this county with our local school districts and really creating collaboration where collaboration hadn't existed in the past. Oftentimes we've sat in these rooms and we've talked about the conversations around traditional ISDs versus public charters, and we're seeing some of those conversations break down, which is really positive, right? But I think on the other end of that what I've experienced sort of from a high level perspective is the lack of information that was shared with community, and I just want to be very open and transparent about what I was experiencing as a policymaker, as individuals in the community were really questioning what this meant for them. And so what I can say is there are organizations that, went to work immediately when this legislation passed, like the School Discovery Network, who started creating community, homegrown, grassroots information nights, bringing families in communities that these vouchers are, intended to serve, information and answering questions. I will say there are also challenges with the application because there are individuals, right? I think one of the first pillars that are being discussed is really going into communities where there's low income, right? Low socioeconomic families and challenges with funding. And along with that comes another litany of challenges, including the inability to access your tax documents, right? Inability to access Social Security and birth certificates, and all of those things were requirements as part of this application. And I think those sorts of things put barriers in front of families where opportunity could have been afforded to individuals. And so some of those pieces of information were very hard for families to navigate. And so as somebody on the policy side, I think more could have done. Perhaps the agency could have worked with organizations across the state to provide information to families on the front end before these applications went live, right? There was a lot of work that could have been done to help support families. As a policymaker, I still have a lot of questions around how ESA is going to function. And I can talk more about the funding side of things. I have questions as a member serving on the Permanent School Fund Corporation about implications for that and bond guarantee programs and things, but I can go into that.
Yes. Marisa, thank you so much. Jason, as the director of the Center for Catholic Studies at St. Mary's University, you also have a different sort of vantage point here. Can you tell me about how this might help Catholic schools? Because what we're hearing is that they've been affected by under-enrollment for quite some time.
Yep, thank you very much. Yeah, Catholic schools have a long sort of tradition of serving different kinds of communities, particularly sort of local ones, founded in a variety of neighborhoods, originally for immigrant communities sort of coming around. As, of course, demographics and neighborhoods sort of shifted, they found themselves on a little bit more fragile ground. But one of the other commitments that they've always had is to the poor and the marginalized. And I feel like anytime you're serving the poor and marginalized, you end up poor and marginalized yourself. And so trying to find ways in which to sustain that kind of education, which I see as a kind of complement, hopefully not a competition with the sort of public schools that are there. So the funding then I think provides those not just the families for the opportunity to sort of go here, but also a way for the schools to think through broadly the aid that they provide to almost all of their sort of students. So it kind of expand that and open that kind of education that it offers to a broader swath of people who would benefit from it and sort of choose those pieces.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. Marisa, tell us about the money. Tell us. Let's go back to that.
So I'm a little cautious to even throw it out into the ethos, right? But the Permanent School Fund Corporation is a sovereign wealth fund. It's the largest education endowment in the country. Texas owns that. It's constitutionally protected, and it provides access to districts across the state to guarantee their bonds. And right now, the Permanent School Fund Corporation Board is responsible for that bond guarantee program for districts and charter schools. You now enter into this, into this environment, a new factor that's having access to, to tax dollars, right? And I question whether or not we're going to see something come through in legislation this next legislative cycle around amendments to the permanent school fund, and how we choose to use public dollars with the permanent school fund, and that would change the history of what this fund has done in the past. So that's, it's concerning to me. I'm a little nervous to name it out loud, but it's, I'm sure that I'm not the only one thinking about these things.
Absolutely. Daniel, so you've been at the Capitol for a while working. Yeah. In Texas, Texans have just a really polarized look at ESAs, right, and what it's going to do for us. Can you tell us a little bit about those? There's folks that argue that diverting funds away from public schools will harm the communities, that sort of thing. Can you tell us about
Thankfully,
that?
I don't work at the Capitol anymore, so I can let it go. But so prior to my role at Odyssey, I worked for the Speaker of the House doing education workforce development policy. But just to remember Perez-Diaz's point, the state spent a lot of time on marketing. We spent 30 owned events across the state, going to communities in the Valley, San Antonio, Midland, Odessa, Tyler, and we interacted with more than 4,000 families doing this across the state, which was unbelievable. But
Before
I think
about the ESA rollout.
Yes, that ESA rollout started middle of January. Yes, and we did about 29 events throughout across the state. So again, School Discovery Network, a great partner. Ray's here, I saw him somewhere. And so that's been, Inga's here, yeah. And so, but to that point, I think that, everything, I think the same conversation existed around charter schools, back in the day. And everything thought that was the big bad wolf on traditional districts. But we will say the proof will be in the pudding, and whether that, those prioritized groups end up enrolling and matriculating and using those funds. And I think that the 36.5%, which is the largest cohort of the federal poverty limit, groups are make less than 200% of the federal poverty limit. That's the largest plurality and the breakdown. So I guess we'll see what happens when the funds get rolled out and what that opt-in rate is. Because I think to making sure that each kid that gets awarded who it's intended for, that there's a spot for them. And so that will be really where I think the rubber meets the road on the effectiveness and efficacy of the program.
And it's going to happen. It's going to have to happen pretty fast.
Yeah, money's out the door on July 1. Statute says the accounts need to be funded. 25% must be in their account by July 1. That's right.
Okay, and that's the $1 billion that Texas has set aside, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about how do you think that's going to play first day of school here in Bexar County, Dahlia?
So, when we look at the numbers across the state of Texas, all of this is projections based on nothing, but based on some data, right? I mean, I say that, and it's funny because it is like a big question mark. But there's, we're projected to have about 6,000 to 7,000 students in San Antonio who would be getting education savings accounts. Don't quote me because that's not for sure. And so, it's in the first biennium, it's not a lot of students. And where that's going to be concentrated, to my knowledge, we don't have data yet on are those students who are already in private schools and families are making sacrifices to do that. Are they mainly in home schools? Are they concentrated in certain districts? We do have application numbers by district, and that is publicly available data. So you can see how many kids said they go to SAISD and applied, Northside and applied. And we do see quite a few numbers in San Antonio. So how it's going to play out, unsure. As soon as there may be another extension to the application, I know is extended till today. If there's another extension, then that just kind of bumps the timeline a little bit. And there's a lot of people that need to plan. If you are a private school that is getting an influx of students, you've got to plan for hiring. If you are a public school who is getting, or you're being impacted by students moving out, you have to anticipate that and make hires. And so it is a very tight timeline. Folks are really thinking about it. But unfortunately, we're in a little bit of a guessing game to see, how that's going to play out.
I think it's interesting. Northside ISD is one of the districts that's seen the highest number of ESA applications, and then any ISD is followed by San Antonio ISD. But what we don't really know, are these potentially students that are going to be leaving the school district? What does that mean? How will that play out, right?
Right.
What about the conversation about what it means for special education students, because we know the way that the public schools are set up, there are very clear sort of mandates in how students have access to certain services. So how do you think that that's going to play out, Marisa?
I think it'll be, again, interesting to see. So as it stands right now, many private schools across the city are not able to support students with special abilities. And so typically what happens is there's a contractual agreement between the local ISD and that private school that they offer the resources for that student that needs services. So, it would stand to reason that either these private schools that are now receiving voucher dollars will use those dollars to then bring on resources to their campuses, or the individuals the institutions who choose to still not offer those services will then not be able to service students with special needs, and that's going to be the prerogative of every institution. And so I don't have an answer for that question. It's a we'll see. My hope is that individuals who exist to serve young people in the education system would use those dollars for good, especially because they're getting an influx of dollars. Yeah. But we're going to have to see what happens with that.
Jason, what are you hearing from Catholic educators on, whether or not there will be like sort of an influx of students enrolling with special needs, and how will they approach that?
Like the fellow panelist said, like it's kind of a guessing game. I think they see it as a real opportunity to help students that are interested in the program or are interested in the school to sort of attend the school as well. I think they're a little bit cautious, but for a bunch of reasons. Like you might get a few, and if you get a lot, that's going to actually put pressure on the school, pressure sort of on hiring. Is it sustainable sort of long-term as well? And so trying to figure out how that might play out, not just this coming year, but over the next sort of 4 or 5 years as well. And I think even looking sort of further out, they're trying to figure out, like, this can kind of help us as well, but how do we also sort of maintain our mission and our identity when we're taking these sort of funds? And so trying to think those pieces out, I think they're hoping for some addition, some sort of support, but something that kind of enhances them and enhances their relationships with other institutions around. So I think that's I think what their ideal situation would sort of be.
Thank you. Daniel, can you kind of speak to that? Children with disabilities can qualify up to $30,000 through this ESA program. What is that money used for? What do you think?
Yeah, so just to take one step back, because I don't think we even mentioned it. So if you choose to opt in that you're going to attend an accredited private school in the state, that award amount without special needs is $10,474. If you choose to do homeschooling, you are capped at $2,000, regardless of your IEP or special needs or whatever. So if you choose to participate in an accredited private school, and the way that our company kind of set it up with TEA is that we basically verify with TEA through their S number or UID or social that student that was at that district and what that student would have generated had that student attended that local school district. People think it's an easy chart. There's 72,000 permutations across, depending on what it is for that funding amount. So it's every instructional code, and then where you live depends on what that number is. Mm-hmm. So families can use that for part of tuition. Obviously if it's a specialized private school, is it one in Fort Worth? I'm forgetting the Catholic school in Fort Worth, but it's just these incredible ones. But yes, tuition probably is higher, and for those that it's probably lower, they have this ability to use those extra funds to spend in the marketplace, which I don't think we've really discussed at all. But that was, I think, to your model of how do districts kind of partner with these new innovative models that are brand new and allow parents to shop around for therapies and services and dual credit and that kind of thing. So, I guess we'll see. I think what those special education students, if they get awarded and there's a spot for them in a school, I think that's will again be what the future will hold for those students.
It's interesting. Thank you for bringing up the accredited ESA funds. Private schools are not eligible to use these funds unless they've been accredited for 2 years. So it's not like new schools can sort of pop up tomorrow and be eligible to use them, correct? Education services and individual providers or vendors, it's a little less clear in terms of what organizations might be eligible to take students using ESAs. Can you explain how the state is defining education services?
Sure. So everything from a tutoring service, a therapy so that you would get, any kind of occupational therapy, physical therapy, any kind of, additional teaching services, anything that really dual credit classes, so private institutions can offer it, community colleges can offer it, four-year institutions, and it allows, I think, for this more of the, especially the older end, or, the parents what they want to do. I think the great thing is that you have, we already have school, charter schools that have already applied to be vendors in this space, and they plan on offering either it's virtual programs or AP bios, things like that, where you might have a homeschool student that wants to send their kid to do that, or is a private school doesn't offer this course, and then they can kind of do that as well. So really pretty flexible. We contract with the state to do all that for the back end for the state.
Dahlia, what are you hearing about what organizations might kind of fit that bill here?
I do want to name just a couple of things to be clear-eyed about for families that are navigating. There are families that have children who are already identified and have an IEP, have gone through the multi-tiered systems of support process. There are many families that are in the pipeline, right? So they might just be getting into tier 2, tier 3. It is a process to get an IEP. And in some places that process runs well, and in other places that process does not run well and is arduous and takes a lot of time. The burden of getting families through the IEP process right now is on the school districts, because any family who is wanting to leverage the special needs, increase will have to have an IEP to demonstrate, why you need more money and what those dollars would be spent on. So that's a real tension point. There's another real tension point that if you look across San Antonio, it's not like if I have a child that is medically fragile, that I have 5 options to send them to another place, right? So we do have a supply gap of schools and places where they could go and get those services. So there is some, really exciting opportunity. The idea of being able to leverage up to $30,000 for a school of your choice. And there are some real pain points in that process that districts are feeling the burden of, that families are feeling the burden of, and there aren't enough choices. I think that San Antonio could get really creative about what those additional options are for school settings for children. I saw Celebrate Dyslexia schools posted that they are now a provider, which is fantastic because they're a charter school in the city. But now they will be able to provide dyslexia therapy to children that are leveraging ESA dollars anywhere in the city. And so that's going to open up opportunity for lots of kids, which is great. I think about folks like Disability SA, any other plethora of nonprofit partners who are helping families, children, and adults. I think that they could come in as service providers. I'm even like, could you work with a district or a charter operator and pilot a small micro school option for a set of families? If you are a student with diverse learning needs, they are not, their needs are wide and vary. And what they need are, there's all the way from like you'd never know to someone who might be medically fragile or in a wheelchair. And so being able to understand the diversity of needs and the ways that we can do better at serving children and providing them pathways and avenues that help them reach their full potential, have dignified experiences, and really thrive and contribute to their community matters. And I think that's a huge conversation for us to be having with students and families, and brainstorming and ideating and generating and building with our nonprofit partners and non-traditional allies, maybe even employer partners, right? I mean, it really is an opportunity for anybody who has a deep, caring connection to better serve children in the city to say, hey, I want to help out. How could we partner with you to do this? And so I think that San Antonio will have to be creative. We will have to be courageous. We'll have to step out into new places and spaces to partner. But there will be some very serious challenges, because with change and growth, pain is, and disturbance is always a part of the process.
Dahlia, thank you so much. Marisa, what role, since we were talking about the future accreditation of schools, what role will the State Board of Education play in that to determine which schools will be eligible for these funds as well as education services?
That's a great question. I just want to acknowledge really quickly, Dalia, that was like, I could not have articulated a more holistic perspective. It was beautifully
It was beautiful. Yes, that's the quote.
Yeah, so I don't know at this point. The State Board of Education has really been kept at arm's length as far as this process is concerned. So a lot of what we know from the ESAs has been a lot of either self-education, going in and asking TEA some of the hard questions. And to be quite honest, TEA hasn't been so forthcoming with the State Board of Education in recent months. And so some of those concerns, I think if there was more transparency between the state agency and even the governing body, right? That would be very helpful, because we could be champions for something that exists, right? Regardless of whether or not we agreed on how that came to be, it exists today. And so we are responsible to constituents across this state that are asking us questions, and so we need to be well informed to be able to go out and share. And so today I can't tell you that we have any kind of authority over what that accreditation is going to look like. We haven't to this point, but that's a great question to ask the Commissioner of Education on the dais next week while I'm in my board meeting. So it will happen.
Good. Well, thank you so much, Maestas.
I think we could share a little bit about accreditation. You want to?
Yeah. So the statute says to be an approved private school, you must be recognized by an agency that the Texas Association of Private School Accreditation Commission recognizes. So there's about 19 different, or TEA recognizes. TEA recognizes the International of Learner-Driven Schools right now. So like all your Acton academies, I'm sure you've heard of those. They're accredited through them. And then there's 19 different accreditors, the TXIA of the Association of Christian Schools International, TAPS, all of those other ones. So we have to take all of those schools and, they're all eligible already. And then we also have to verify on our end that they've continuously operated a campus for the last 2 years. So we take that burden on, I think, to the earlier point, you don't want the legislature did not want these schools popping up out of nowhere, to make sure that there was some, and so we do all of that, and so we kind of make sure that, we're like, is this school legit? How do we look you up? That kind of thing. So we do vetting on them for sure.
Great. So the final question, at the San Antonio Report, we're always looking for solutions rather than just articulating the problems here. I'm grateful to each of you on this stage for spending the time with us today to help our community better understand such a key moment in education. So to close our discussion, tell me from your perspective, it's open to all, how Texas education as a whole can improve with more flexibility and the introduction of this student-centered funding model. Who wants it first?
Eat all the above.
I don't mind going first.
Okay,
That's a really big question. I think maybe let me start. I'll sort of foundationally begin and let everybody kind of build off. I think first and foremost, it's really important to information share and to support organizations that are doing the really hard work to information share. So I call it out, even if you weren't sitting next to me, but the work that City Education Partners is doing in terms of the depth of research and knowledge and connection building that they're doing, not just here in Texas, but nationally, is so powerful. And so for funders in the room who are looking to back people who are really doing the hard work to make sure that people understand, that our communities understand what resources are out there, find organizations like City Education Partners, support organizations like Cass Schools Network, which is doing innovative work every day in our traditional ISDs, right, that have the potential to take advantage of these ESA programs, right? Support local nonprofit organizations like the School Discovery Network that took it upon themselves with their small team to go out and mobilize individuals and teach the teacher and train the trainer so that communities could see people that look like them, tell them about the resources that they have, right? Connection is so important, and everybody in this room knows that San Antonio is a relationships-based city and community. That is mission critical in this work.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I will echo that. Parent navigation is going to be absolutely important. I think that if anybody has an opportunity to have FaceTime to create small and intimate and safe spaces to listen to families, hear what their experiences are, hear what their hopes and dreams are, hear what their ideas are, and then share that information with folks who are interested in creating solutions. We've got to make that possible. I want to echo Maestas' celebration of School Discovery Network that rebranded themselves and went out and did a lot of parent and community outreach and education, because when new things happen, there's a ton of information. I remember opening my phone and being like, well, that's not true. Well, that's not true. Well, that's not true, but no one really knows. And that was one of the things that would be my second thing, is educate yourself. When all of this came about, I was listening to the news and reading the papers and in my spaces, hearing the narrative, and I was like, oh gosh, here we go again with, public ed is being dismantled and this is terrible. And so I was like, I've got to go talk to families, and I'd start spending time with families and like, wow, these two conversations couldn't be any more different. There is a disconnect and a divide. And what if we could just really think about centering children and make it our job to figure out how systems have to shift? Yes, the impact is hard. Yes, the impact is complex, challenging. Put that in the geopolitical space that we're in. It's like to the nth level. But that's our job, to figure that part out, not on the backs of children. And so what is the opportunity? It is just another tool in the toolkit. It is not a silver bullet, like someone said earlier. So thinking creatively about how can we leverage this? We have an event coming up that it has a superintendent from Indianapolis who's a rural superintendent who went and applied for a charter. He got approved to open a charter of micro schools. He's still a superintendent also. He has 2 boards that he reports to, and he's incubating micro schools within his own school district. They're serving 62 kids in year 1, 1,000 kids in year 2, and 6,000 kids in year 3. This was a school district that he was like, I was 10 kids unenrolling away from having a budget crisis. So I say that to say there is a lot of opportunity if we are creative, if we bust the walls down. One of the superintendents at the panel last week said, we've been pitted against each other for so long. It doesn't really have to be that way. And so I was like, yes, this is amazing. Let's collaborate for our kids. Let's figure out how to, solve problems together. And that type of bold and courageous leadership is necessary. And we, the community of San Antonio, need to rally around leaders that are doing that. Provide them cover, provide them with support. If you are a funder in this room, provide them with funding opportunities for collaborative, creative building. So center the voice of parents, educate yourself, and think about if there is a rightful role for you to play. You may not traditionally be like, oh, that wasn't our work, but could it be? And should it be? Yeah. And how could you partner, and what could that look like? And so I would say, those are ways that we can lean in. We do not have to be spectators of what's happening. We can actually be builders in San Antonio, and we have some very brilliant minds in our city. So my invitation to you is to be a builder.
Thank you.
I have to follow that. Okay. I think, one more shout out to Inga, School Discovery Network. After we won the contract, she was the first one to email me saying, how can I get involved? And that's what I think that the point is. We need to have more communities at the local level leaning in and putting kids at the center of, what's best. Additionally, I do think the micro school movement's real, which is very interesting too, because, some micro schools are homeschool kids, and some micro school sites are accredited by an accrediting body. Yeah. So they have different standards in how those operate. And so, the accrediting cycles for these accreditors, there'll be one next month, and we're expecting to see a pretty big spike in accredited micro schools across the state. So it'll be pretty interesting to see, what, those tuition levels are, and then what are the a la carte method that parents kind of want to say, okay, I'm pulling my kid out, but I want them to do, go down the street and take 8th grade math with the public school, or charter school, and what that looks like, on a virtual school level, and kind of the shopping around of what parents, what kids are involved in, and what they care about, and is it going to, be a farmer in a chicken coop, or you're at a STEM class all day? Yeah. And I don't know. And so, but I just think that there's a great opportunity for everyone to lean in to say, what we're doing even, 10 years ago, totally out of date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What do you think?
I think to build on all of these pieces is just to remember the bigger picture of what the education is about. The money's a big issue, the policies are a big issue, the rollout is a sort of a big issue, but education's not about SAT scores or GPA, it's about getting to college or even sort of getting a job and earning a lot of money. All of those things are sort of important, but really it is about the dignity of the human person, their agency as a person, their role in the community, their concern for what's good and true and real and beautiful, and trying to keep that in our mind as the guide as we roll out these sort of specific pieces. I think that's the way in which these things sort of come out as well. So.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you all for joining us, all our speakers. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you. And then I'm going to introduce Xochitl Garcia, which is our education reporter for the San Antonio Report, and she has a few words that she wants to share.
Hello, everyone. As she said, my name is Xochitl Garcia. I cover K-12 education here at the San Antonio Report. Thank you all so much for coming today. A special thank you to Texas Public Radio for hosting us and to our wonderful sponsors, including the Charles Butt Foundation, UP Partnership, City Education Partners, Valero, the Cambrinas Company, Pre-K4SA, Frost Bank, and so many others. We really could not do this without your support. I joined the report in February of 2025. Right on the precipice of seismic changes in our public and private education systems. And this year, I've kept up with over a dozen school districts in Bexar County, several charters, and now with the launch of ESAs in Texas, private schools, and vendors. Being the education reporter sometimes also means being a politics reporter, unfortunately, breaking down education policy jargon, making note of all the players involved, which includes many of you in this room. Looking forward to talking to you. And of course, writing about school board elections, which if you haven't already, please check out our comprehensive education voter guide to read up on school board races and one bond election on the ballot this May. Doing this kind of work at the report gives me a special and often rare window into what's actually happening in classrooms and how that affects San Antonio at a larger scale. I look for the wins, the losses, the everyday moments that seem mundane but add up to a student's education life cycle. Though journalism is not always a place where sentimentality is welcome, it's hard not to get attached to the stories I cover. As one very special reader told me after reading one of my stories recently, "You really stirred me up." This kind of stirring work could not be done without your support. All of the work we do here at the report is community-driven, so please, please consider becoming a monthly member of the SA Report. Subscribe to our newsletters, check out our education voter guide, and keep us in mind for your local news coverage. Thank you all for coming today. I really hope everyone learned something, and have a great day.